Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Caseware webinar. Today, we are looking at an introduction to cloud audit, introductory level, as the name suggests. This is going to be showing you, well, actually, we're going to be looking at the Cloud Audit Mercia product today, but most of what you're going to be seeing today is going to be transferable to other apps within the Cloud Audit suite. I am joined by James Clarkson today. James is a professional services consultant at Caseware UK. James is going to be taking you through the content and will be on hand as a subject matter expert to answer any questions that you have. My name's Tom Jeffrey. I'm the Senior Education and Media Technician at Caseware UK. I'll be making sure that everything runs smoothly, keeping an eye on the session, monitoring your questions, going through any housekeeping, that kind of thing. In terms of housekeeping, we have our Q&A option on the toolbar there, which hopefully you'll be familiar with the Q&A option in Zoom. You can submit your questions there during the session. We will get back to you as soon as we can. We'll cover as many as we can during the session. Depending on how much time we have at the end, we'll have a Q&A as well. Any questions that we don't answer live will go into a Q&A document, which will go onto our knowledge base. That's going to accompany the recording of the session. The recording will also go onto our YouTube channel, which we'll signpost a bit later on. And we'll also get back to you directly afterwards. So don't worry if we don't cover your question live. We will cover it in the wrap-up and follow-up after the session. So that's the housekeeping out of the way. I'll just jump to the agenda. I'll pass over to James and we'll get started.
Yep. Thank you, Tom. I'm just having some video issues here. It keeps flashing at me instead. There we go. I've got it going. Okay, so yeah, thanks for joining the webinar, everyone. This is going to be quite a high-level introduction, really, into the Cloud Audit platform. We've got quite an agenda showing on the screen. We're going to delve into various different areas of the platform, but mainly focusing around the file setup and planning stage to get through to our work program tailorings, where we set out the work we'll be undertaking within the field work of the audit. And as we do that, we'll see how what we might do in one particular section of the file actually impacts other parts of the section of the file, such as the risk assessment impacting the procedures we bring into our work program. So I'm going to get my screen sharing going, which will hopefully go better than turning my camera on. And we'll get started. So there we go. So you should be able, yes, it looks like you can see my screen. So excellent. So start off from the cloud platform. The cloud platform is where, our clients live effectively, or details of our clients, and where we access all our different applications. And I'm already on the Audit Mercia UK company application, and I have a client selected in the drop-down at the top of the screen. To navigate to the application, 3 lines menu button, and you'll see the different applications you can access in there, the different engagement types, and that will take you into this screen. And the starting point is to create a new engagement. So I have got one engagement showing here, but I'm going to start with a new one today. We can create an engagement file either from the client record, from the plus button up at the top right of the screen, just selecting the type of engagement we want, or from using new when we're viewing that particular engagement type itself. So I'll press the new button and that will load up this panel. The entity is pre-selected because it's the one I've selected up at the top left of the screen. You can always click in and change it if you need to. We enter a file name. We tend to recommend using something to identify the client, such as the client code or the name of the client, followed by the year-end date. The reason for that is so that whatever view you've got of engagement files in the background there, you know which engagement file relates to which client and to which year-end. Because you may not see that depending on the columns. Once I've populated the name, I've got to carry forward data from. Now, when you're creating a brand new engagement, you won't be using this feature, but this is used when we roll forwards files, getting ready for next year's audit. And that will copy across a lot of the data from our current year file that we're going to be working on today. Entity for source engagement. Again, I'm not going to use it, but this is really useful if you have a number of quite consistent engagements. Perhaps they're all entities that are part of the same group. And Or perhaps they're all similar types of engagements. They're all academy engagements or something that all have quite a lot of similarities in them. What we can do with this is we can choose another client and then choose an engagement file within that client to use as a basis for the engagement file we're creating. And that will copy across all the documentation we've added into that file. It will copy across all the responses to procedures. So effectively, we start off with a pre-built file based on that other engagement. It doesn't copy across trial balance data, doesn't copy across sign-offs, won't copy across any issues. So we can still go through and update and customize everything for this particular client. Start date, end date, budget hours, budget amount. This is all to do with our work planning. When are we carrying out the audit work? What's it going to, well, what sort of budget are we allowing? How much time are we spending? Preparer and reviewer can make it slightly easier to find our engagement files that we're working on within the cloud environment. I'm not going to select any today, but you can search for any other cloud users within here. And then we've got a limited option down at the bottom. This does not mean that this is a limited company. What it does is if I turn it on, it effectively restricts the access to this particular engagement file to all other members of the team, apart from any administrators in cloud. When I turn it on, my save button actually turns into save and share. If I was to save and share, it would create the engagement for me and I could pick and choose which of my colleagues I actually wanted to share the engagement file with, who else should be accessing it. So it's really useful for any particularly confidential engagements. But I'll turn that off and just press save. Now this will use the general firm template that I've got set up in the background. It should be the standard Caseware Mercia template, and it will create an engagement file for us. And it shouldn't take too long. There we go. And our engagement file's ready. So some quick little navigation tips. We're on the document screen. We've got a black bar across the top, and this gives us different screens, different areas that we can access within the cloud environment. And we're sat on the document screen where we'll see the documentation within our file. There's not too much in there at the moment because we haven't done any tailoring, setting out circumstance of the engagement to bring relevant documentation in. But we have a number of other screens we can access at the top, some of which we are going to go into during the course of this session. Over at the top right of the screen, you've got a plus button. That's a really handy shortcut, especially when you're working through planning. Quick little shortcut to document a risk. You're going to come across risks at various different points, and you can use this shortcut, whatever document you're working on. Just pop up here, say you want to record a risk when you identify something, and it will let you add a risk straight away. Similarly for controls and later adjustments that you might want to record. On the left-hand side of the screen, we see, well, the different sections of the file. Not too many at the moment, but these do serve as links, take you up and down to navigate between the sections quickly and efficiently. To the left of that, you've got progress meters that will update as we go through and complete documentation in the file. Above these options, we got three little buttons at the top, three little icons: print, filters, and more actions. We're going to have a look at more actions shortly, but within filters, this is quite a recent addition, so I'd quite like to mention this. We can filter the documents we see on the screen by those that we haven't signed off as prepared or those that we haven't signed off as reviewed. Or even filter by a particular sign-off role. Now, obviously, I haven't got too much to filter at the moment, but the functionality there works quite nicely, so please do explore it because it will help you identify what you haven't finished yet. And on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got our grey bar going down the side with a documents icon at the top of it. This is a shortcut, effectively, to any documents that we've got visible on the document screen. So we can access this, whatever document we're in, and use it to jump to other documents really quickly. And again, I will come in here because it is a nice, quick way of accessing different documents. So up at the top left of the screen, you'll see the company name. When you create a new file, it's quite important that you come to the top left, select the company name, and then you'll get a menu full of all sorts of different options. We get workflow stages in here. These workflow stages don't automatically update, so it would be up to you to keep these updated on the progress of the file as you pass particular milestones. But in here, we can set the year-end date. So I'd think I put a year-end date in of 2024. So I'll come in here and I will move this forwards, 2024, December 31st. And then I'll just press save to save that in. Okay, once we've set the year-end date, you've got a choice really in terms of where you go next. If you've got a trial balance available, you can bring in the trial balance and we can go through and assign it because the trial balance feeds some of the automation that we see within the file. Or if we haven't got a trial balance available, we can go ahead and start bringing documentation in. Now for today, we're going to have a trial balance available nice and conveniently right at the outset, so we can look to bring that in. So I'll go to data at the top of the screen in the black bar, and that loads up our datasets page initially. When we have data imported, it might take you straight onto the accounts page, potentially, but you've got a little menu on the left there that you can navigate between the screens. To import data, we have a number of different options. We can drag and drop a file. That's what we will do shortly. If we've already got an Excel file in our documents list, we can import straight from the documents list. We don't have to save the file down to then drag it in. We can just pull it straight from there. We can import from another engagement. I'm not sure how often you will be doing that, but the option's there. And if you want to pull in data from a separate platform, you've got import from data connector. And we've got quite a long list of different platforms you can pull data in from on here. It's probably going to be easier searching for whatever you're looking for rather than scrolling through it as I am. You've also got an option to import from working papers. Now, if I was to press this button within my cloud engagement, it's not actually going to let me import from our working papers desktop product. But for anyone migrating to Caseware Cloud from Caseware Desktop, what this button does is it tells you there's a document you can use within your desktop file called Cloud Bridge that you can use to push up trial balance data from your desktop file into Caseware Cloud. Now, shortly, we're going to go in and assign accounts to Caseware's financial groups so that Caseware knows what each account we've imported is. One advantage for desktop users there is that if you are pushing the data up from desktop using Cloud Bridge, it does the majority of the account assignment for you in cloud as well. So that will save you a fair bit of time on that. I have my trial balance file open, so I'll just quickly show it. There are a couple of things to be aware of on your trial balances. So your header row, the row above your trial balance data, it must be within the top 30 rows of your Excel document or your CSV file. If it's beneath the top 30 rows, you're going to need to edit the document to bring it into the top 30. And you also shouldn't have any totals on the bottom. Otherwise, the file format doesn't matter too much. You can have the columns in any order you want, and you can have extra columns in here that you don't actually want to import. So that's the file I'm going to use. I'm not going to save that. I didn't think I changed anything. But what I am going to do is I'm just going to drag it and I'm going to drop it in the box where it's turning green. So the first thing we're asked to do is configure the dataset. What is it we're importing? We're importing a trial balance, but you've got other data sets there you can select. These are mainly for use with our Analytics Hub, which we're not going into today, but we do have other content on the Analytics Hub available on the knowledge base. So I'll select trial balance. It says, are we importing a final trial balance or planning trial balance? I'll go with the final one. And then header row preview. Well, this blue highlighted row is the row that it thinks is my header row, but that's not actually it. So I'll need to adjust this because if I import it like that, I'll miss my top row. So I'll select the row above instead and then press upload. Now this will process and it won't actually move from being in progress when it's completed, because after it has uploaded the data, we then need to tell Caseware what we've got in each column of our trial balance Excel document. So I'll go to configure, and that takes us to this screen where we can click in and we can tell Caseware what is in each column. There's not too many things to choose from. If you have got proper headers at the top of your columns, there is an AI function up at the top that you can select and it will assign the columns quickly for you. I didn't have headers above my account number and account name though, so I'll need to click in and just assign those myself. Obviously, if you use the AI function, check what it's assigned to make sure it has done the right thing. I haven't come across it not doing the right thing, but that's not to say it's not going to at some point. So I'll press import. And this will take a moment to process. But what we'll see is this data set on this page will change from being in progress to being our trial balance data set. And we'll see that update there. Okay, so once we've imported the data, in the left-hand menu of the data screen, the account screen shows us that trial balance data we've imported, which is all well and good, but Caseware as yet doesn't actually know what any of these accounts are. Up at the top right, we have this red notification on this assign accounts icon that tells me I've got 46 accounts to assign. So we can either select this or we can select assign accounts on the left, and it takes us to the assign accounts screen. On the assign accounts screen, we see our trial balance accounts on the left-hand side. We can move up and down them and everything as you would do. And we see Caseware's financial groups on the right. And the idea behind this is we need to move each of our accounts across to one of Caseware's financial groups on the right so that it will populate the relevant areas of our engagement. I'm going to use plant and machinery as an example here because I'm not going to make you watch me do all of them. But I can look at my tangible fixed assets up at the top and expand it. Within there, I can see my plant and machinery. So I'll expand that. And then I just get the one plant and machinery financial group. I can select all my plant and machinery related accounts on the left, and I can either drag and drop them on that financial group, or if I hover over the group, I can press assign. And that moves them all across in one go. Now, I haven't said actually that this is an additions account and this is a depreciation account or anything. That's set through an extension to our financial groups, something called dimensions. And the purpose behind dimensions is it makes it easier to build our own lead schedules and things later. But to set the dimensions, I need to hover over the account. I'll select the drop-down arrow, come to assign dimensions, and then I'll see that I can say, yes, this is a cost account and it's additions, and save that in. I'll do it for my depreciation brought forwards as well, and I don't like leaving anything incomplete, so I will do it for the charge in the year. But you'll see, yeah, it's a couple of extra clicks to do this, but it doesn't take too long, and it means that these accounts will populate the relevant places in our fixed assets lead schedule later. Now, you've also got a search function up at the top of our financial groups. There's a lot of financial groups, and it's not always that easy to find things. So I'm going to use the search just to find motor running costs. If I can actually, my spacebar works, there we go. And it filters the groups quite nice and quickly, so I can just move my motor running costs across and assign it. So you're probably likely to use the search as you go through and do your profit and loss accounts because they tend to be some of those that are less harder to find. And they do filter very nicely with the search. Now, if we can avoid doing this on any engagements, that's preferable, I suppose. Well, if you have other clients, other files, other trial balances with consistent accounts within the chart of accounts, we have got a tool you can use on the document screen. It's in the trial balance and mapping section here, we've got the TBM3 trial balance import tool that we can use. Now, when I click into it, it shows me all my unassigned accounts. Okay, that's not great, and gives me a link to assign accounts. Well, I didn't come here to do that. In the left-hand menu here, you have got an import option and you've got an export option. So to use this tool, it does require first doing an export of the financial groups from the other file that has the consistent trial balancing, or consistent chart of accounts, I should say. So we got guidance on our knowledge base on how to do that, but I'm just going to use it to import my financial groups quickly against each of these accounts. So I go to import. At the top, I need to pick the entity where I have a consistent chart of accounts. And I've got one set up called mapping template for companies on here. And I can then choose the mappings file from that entity that I want to use. So that's the mappings file that I've exported from that entity. And I'll choose my mapping to template for companies again. Now what you'll see is it changes the colors of the accounts on the screen. So any green ones, they exist in my other entity, and I haven't mapped them in this engagement, so it will automatically map them for me. Black ones exist both in or have been assigned in my engagement, and they do also exist in the configuration file. And if it's black, it means that they're mapped or they're assigned to the same place. Any red ones, there's a difference between where it's mapped in my engagement compared to the configuration. So I can choose whether to update it or not. So I'll deselect that one. I've probably got another red one there. And then to assign these, I'll just press Assign Groupings up at the top right. I'll confirm on the pop-up. And we should see the configuration grouping is copied across into the engagement grouping. So now all my accounts are assigned. Now, the most important thing to do after using this tool is to double check the left-hand menu where you have your unassigned accounts. Is there anything that hasn't yet been assigned? Because if there is, it was a difference from this chart of accounts to the chart of accounts we're copying. We need to go back and assign that ourselves on the Assign Accounts screen. So with everything assigned, I'm going to come back to the data screen just to mention to you the accounts and financial group screen, because I'm not sure everyone makes the best use of these screens that they can do. So the account screen is your view of the trial balance that's imported. It's the view of the full trial balance. You can see adjustments on there. And if you want to break the adjustments down, once we've got some, you've got a split adjustments section option at the top that breaks them down between normal adjustments and reclassifications. But you can also add in extra columns into this view with the columns drop down. So I can bring in variances by selecting variance in the list there, and you'll see they get added on the right. What if I want my variances somewhere else? Well, I can use the 4 little lines that appear when I hover over it to move it, to put it in a different place. I'll put it in straight after the account name for no reason at all, and close that down. So you can see that that's moved over. We can also apply filters to this screen, and personally I think these filters are really useful. We can filter by values using a slider at the top, and you'll see it updates very quickly. Tick box just to show those that are material, once we've set materiality of course, or filter by areas. And so I could just say I just want to see my expenditure accounts, and you'll see they get filtered in the background. Now, what is the point of all this? Well, this is data that you might use in some of your working papers, and you can export it using an export option at the top right of the screen. And you can export it to CSV, and it appears almost instantly, and actually takes a bit longer to open Excel than it does to download. But there, I've got all that data in Excel now. I can do a line-by-line analytical review, apportion a sample, or whatever it might be I want to do with this data. The financial group screen is similar, except all the accounts are broken down by where they're allocated to, where we've assigned them to within Caseware's financial groups. You don't quite get the same options at the top of the screen. We can turn off the accounts if we want to, see it at a high level. We can add in variances again. We can add in numbers, but you don't get the same level of filters on this particular screen. But however you set this screen up, you can export again up at the top right. So now that we've got some data in, we'll have a look at bringing some documentation into the file. And as we've already seen, our document screen is looking a little bit sad. It hasn't got too much in it, really. So to bring documentation in, it's all optimized in through our preliminary tailoring document. In this document, we set out some circumstances about the engagement, about the client, and that will bring documentation in that we need in the engagement. So I'll turn on this right-hand documents panel just so I complete it, and we should see it update live. So if I say, is this a new client? I'm going to say no to that one. And we should see some documents drop in. There we go. It took slightly longer than normal. That's probably because I'm screen sharing and everything. I want to use the full planning approach. Okay, we get a planning checklist now, audit strategy document, a few more things drop in, and then I'll just say no to everything else. Now, while I'm saying no to everything, these documents are all built in based on visibility conditions. So there's conditions built into all of, or the majority of the standard documents anyway, that say if a procedure in preliminary tailoring is answered a certain way, that document will show or it won't show. And if something shows, it's deemed to be part of our audit engagement. We can see it. I'm going to sign it off using the sign off indicator up at the top right, and I'm going to sign off prepared, and I'm going to, pretend I'm reviewing it as well and sign off all the stages. Because this allows me to explain the visibility conditions a little better and also show you what happens if something does change. Because we set this up at the start of the engagement and it will be reviewed fairly early on, I would imagine. But it might be as we are working through planning or certainly even working on the audit, we discover something about the client that means we need to revisit some of what we've already done, such as they do actually use service organizations. Well, if they use service organizations, we should have extra related documentation within the file and also extra procedures. So we'd need to come back to preliminary tailoring and say, yes, they do use service organizations. And in the document section on the right, you'll see the PF1-6 using a service organization document is now available. Now, these visibility conditions aren't just built into documentation, but they're built into procedures within the planning documentation, within completion documentation and everything as well, which is, why it's really important that we pay attention to these and we actually get these questions correct at the outset so that we know our file's complete. Now, of course, I've just modified this document after I'd reviewed it. So as a reviewer, I would want to know that had happened. And indeed, we have our review tools at the top. It's spanner and pencil icon. These will show us various different things, but I get a warning triangle up there. That warning triangle tells me that this document has been modified since it was last reviewed. And if I was to click on it and turn on review tools, I have my modified responses here at the bottom. I can select the little number and it takes me straight to what was updated. So that's really helpful. As a reviewer, I can check what has changed, and then if I'm happy with it, either way, if I'm happy with it or not, I'll clear the notification. And clearing the notification resets the timestamp, so I'll be alerted to further changes. Now, if it was me and I was updating this document after it had been reviewed to make the reviewer's life a little bit easier, I'll probably use the little issues flag next to the procedure. This lets us raise an issue to pass on the information about why we're updating it to someone else. It can also be used for review points to note down deficiencies and things like that. Once I've clicked the flag, I get a text box and I can put in whatever my issue is, whatever I want to say to someone else. Updated because, and I'm just going to put XXX to signify whatever else I might say. Now, when you are recording an issue, you need to pay attention to this little issue type down at the bottom left, because this is going to be really helpful in actually helping people understand what the issue is for. When you select it, you'll see things such as review for review point, note, it's a note for someone else, to do things that I need to come back to. So this will be a note and I'll create the issue there so that when the managers or the reviewers looking at this later, they can come in, they can select the issue, reply, resolve, whatever they choose to do there, probably resolve it, and then come up and clear the notification. It's only the last reviewer of a document that can clear this notification. So if you were the preparer, you would not be able to update it. Now I'll come back to documents, and on the document screen, you'll see we don't actually get notified that that had changed, but we can see that there is an issue on the document. A little tip here, if you are a reviewer, come to the three dots button and turn on modified since last review, because then you get notified on this screen as well. So you know that document's been updated since you reviewed it. So I'm just going to have a quick look at some checklists and just give you some hints and tips about working with checklists and how we can use review tools again to help us. So I'm going to go into the planning checklist here. I'll skip past the permanent file. Now, the planning checklist broadly sets out the most appropriate order for us to work through the planning documentation in. And you'll see different procedures, options to say I've done something or I haven't done something, and a reference through to the related document. Now, when you're working on checklists like this and you press a button to say you've done something, it signs off the procedure for you, which is really nice and helpful. Obviously, in doing this, you will be navigating to these documents that are referenced, and you can do that by selecting the annotation and choosing the link, and it will open that document in a new tab for you. That's really important to note that it's in a new tab. You can go through and you can update your procedures in here, but as I put in text and come off the field, you'll notice it doesn't apply the sign off for me because Caseware doesn't know I've finished putting text in or not. So we need to manually apply those sign-offs when we're actually finished with that particular section. And I'm not going to complete everything in here, but I will just go down and sign off some of these procedures, and then we'll have a conclusion at the bottom that we'll also sign off. Within these documents, you have got your separate document sign off up at the top right for the document as a whole. And when you go to sign this off as prepared, you may well see this pop up and it will say you've got some procedures that haven't been signed off. Well, this is a flag to me that I might not actually have done everything I should have done. So I'd say, no, I don't want to sign it off. And this is where my review tools come in again. So I'd use the review tools, turn them on, and now down at the bottom, I've got a missing sign off option, and selecting the little number takes me to whatever I've missed. So this is going to be really useful on those lengthy checklists you've got where you have, I don't know, 30, 40 different buttons to press with two little text boxes snuck in the middle there. Because I can almost guarantee it's on those particular text boxes when you would forget to apply your sign off. So I can also see I've got reviewed by and responsible individual haven't been signed off. If I'm a preparer, that's not for me to do. So I would go ahead and sign this off. Two procedures aren't signed off, but they're not for me, so I will sign it off as prepared anyway. Once you've finished your work on here, if you'd use the annotation to get to this document, instead of clicking back to try and find the planning checklist again to get back to where you were, just close down the tab. Your work's saved and then you're back where you were to start off with. And you can go through to the next document that you need to update, which again opens in a new tab. So you'll do your work here and close it down again. Now I am going to skip a little bit further forwards in the planning checklist because I want to get into our work program tailoring and everything. But before I can do that, we need to be setting materiality. Materiality, and I use the annotation there to go to the B25 materiality document. And materiality is key in terms of driving some of the automation that we see in terms of the work programs we need in the file. So on the document itself, always pay attention to any guidance. You'll have guidance tabs at the top of a lot of these documents that will give you some extra information from Mercia there. But I can set out the principal users. I can add rows in, who they are, what factors am I considering. Overall materiality table, well, this is populated from the financial groups we assigned. So I can just put in my benchmark percentages. 1, 5, and 1 there. I can review the results and then determine what my planning materiality is and pop it in the conclusion field on the right, justifying it accordingly in the justification box. My performance materiality, well, there I'll just put in my benchmark percentage and it does the rest of the work for me. So it tells me what the amount should be. And again, I can justify it. My mouse went to sleep there for a moment, but it looks like it's back. The amount below which misstatement's clearly trivial, here we put in a monetary amount. So I will base it on 1% of overall materiality and again, justification. We have got sections for adding other levels or areas requiring other levels of materiality, but I'm not going to complete them today. And so with materiality set, I can come up to the top and I'll just sign that off accordingly. Now, materiality and net income are both referenced at the top right of the file, whatever section you're in, and they both serve as links. Net income takes you to the account screen to view the trial balance, so it's a handy shortcut there. And materiality takes you back to the B25, so you can easily come back to these things whenever you need to. Now, risks are quite key in terms of the work we're going to be building into our work program. And there's two different elements to it, are the different risks we identify within our planning procedures and our risk assessment for each financial statement area. So we're going to have a quick look at adding a risk to the file. We're going to document an assertion level risk. So risks by default are stored on the risk and controls page or screen that we access in the black bar at the top. And on the risk tab, you will see management override and revenue recognition on every file. But we can add a risk from here, but chances are, and what I'd encourage you to do is to try to get used to adding risks when you identify them in your documentation. So if I'm working in the PF1-1, I'm completing this business operations section, and I come across a risk. I can pause what I'm doing, come up to the plus button up at the top right, and select to add a risk. And you'll see it's kept my place in the background. So I've just got a panel on top. So I can document the risk while it's fresh in my head. So we give the risk a title. Assets may not exist. We're going to think about assets for the rest of, or for the final 10 minutes. We add a description of the risk. And we set out, is it financial statement level or assertion level? What's the status of the risk, normal, significant, or fraud? This is one of those fields that you might want to update later once you've done a more detailed risk assessment on this risk. You can actually come back and update these later. You can update them on the risk and control screen for any risks you've recorded. What audit areas does this risk impact? Well, I can use the blue plus button to select as my tangible fixed assets. But you could drill down if you want to get a bit more detailed. But I'll just select tangible fixed assets. And then which assertions are impacted? Well, this will be my existence. Where have we identified the risk in our file? Well, this is really easy because I'm on the page in the background. So I'll use the blue plus button. I'll just search for my PF1-1 and select it. I can also say where in the PF1-1 document I've identified the risk, and I'll use that grey plus button there just to link through to my business operations section. And while we're adding the risk, why not consider an audit response? While the risk's fresh in our head, it means we won't need to give so much thought to it later. So I can use the blue plus button here to add in an audit response. Now we'll respond to the risk within our work program. So I'll search for my work program here, and you'll see the currently available work programs that have been built in show up. But because we haven't actually tailored our work programs at all yet, you might need to show hidden if you want to use something like directors and related parties or something that's not automatically included. So I'll select my tangible fixed assets work program there. And again, what specific procedures will we carry out in that work program? Well, I'll use that grey plus button and I can see all the procedures that are built in. But again, because we haven't tailored it, there's not a lot to pick from. So I'll tick show hidden up at the top right, and then we'll see a lot more appear. The easiest way to get down to, say, your analytical procedures or test of detail is to actually use the little minus button. It saves a lot of scrolling just to minimize each section. And I'm going to come down to my test of detail, and I'm just going to say that we'll physically inspect an appropriate sample of assets from the asset register. And I'll select that. And it pops up saying, well, you want to link to a hidden procedure? Okay. If you do link to it, we can't hide that procedure anymore. That's absolutely fine, because if something's not hidden, it's showing. So that means it's going to be showing in our work program. So it's already built in. And then I'll save the risk. So you'll see a little risk indicator gets added in the background. That tells anyone reviewing this later that we've identified a risk here, and it will serve as a link, a shortcut to the risk and controls page as well. So that's how we document risks. But as I said, we need to do a risk assessment as well for our financial statement area. So we do that on the assessment page of the risk and controls screen. Now on here, there will be a section included for every area. If something isn't material, if you don't want to do or don't need to do a risk assessment on it, click on it and exclude it. You get some little text that allows you to take them out. But I'm going to expand my tangible fixed assets section here. Select it and it expands. I can see some figures. I get access to some analysis, which takes me to an analysis page of the work program. Just because of time, I won't actually select it now, but it does open in a new tab for you, so you can see the balances that are included. We get a reminder of our assertion level risks, and we can see our financial statement level risks to factor in on the left. When you come down to the risk assessment table, you'll see first all assertions are selected. we should deselect any assertions that we don't consider relevant to this audit area in this particular audit. And of course, will probably vary across audits. So I'm going to turn some of them off. And we then complete our assessment. What is the likelihood of misstatement for each assertion? And you'll go in and select accordingly. What's our magnitude of misstatement for each assertion? And again, you'll select accordingly, and that will calculate the inherent risk for you. We then factor in our control risk down below. I'm not going to be placing reliance on controls, so I'll select non-applicable, and that tells us our risk of material misstatement for each assertion. And we've got our documentation, our justification field down at the bottom here to complete. Each risk assessment area has a sign-off, so I'll sign that off as prepared, and the document as a whole has a sign-off, but I'm not going to do that because I haven't finished everything. But I'll just minimize that back down. So let's follow that through to the work programs. We've got a few minutes, and I would like to leave a couple of minutes for any quick questions that may come in as well. So there's two stages to work programs. First, setting out the work programs we require in the file, and the other one is actually tailoring the procedures in the work programs. So from the document section, I'm going to go to my B40 document, the audit programs required, and the planning checklist does direct you here at the appropriate point. On the B40, we set out the work programs that should be in our engagement file. For any area that's material, it will tell you the balance and it will say, yes, you need a program. For any area that's not material by value, it will ask you, do you want a program? And I'd probably say yes for directors and related parties, no for intangible fixed assets. And then I'll come down to tangible fixed assets where I completed that assessment. And you can see we do need a program because it is a material balance. We can see the relevant assertions. My screen's a little zoomed in, which is why they don't quite fit. And we can see our risk of material misstatement. We can consider our planned audit approach. So I'll do some detailed substantive testing, so let's say. Based on that, we can decide what audit program sections we want in the file. And I'll use the drop down and I'll select analytical procedures and test the detail. And that builds those sections into the work program. Now, I'm not going to go into sampling and sampling forms today because of time, but instead, now we've completed the B40 for this particular section, I'll use the annotation to open the work program. Okay. So you've got a number of different tabs at the top of the work program that I'd invite you just to have a look at in your own time, just to see what is included or see what is included on them, see what you might be able to use. But I'm going to focus on building our procedures in here. So we have a table appear at the top. This is what we call an audit response table, and it's here to help us make sure we are building in procedures into our work program that address all the assertions that we said were relevant in our risk assessment. To use the table, at the outset of building the work program, I'd look at this, I'd say, well, completeness, I will carry out some analytical procedures. So I'll tick the box and I'll carry out some test of detail. And you see these warnings appear. Hover over the warnings and it tells you what they mean. Tells us we're under auditing because we haven't added any procedures in yet of that type addressing that assertion. Well, that's fine. I know I haven't tailored it yet. But for existence, we see a different warning. This one tells us I'm over auditing. Why is that? Well, if I scroll down, we'll see a test of detail added in, and that is linked through to the risk. So that's the one I said I would use to respond to that assertion level risk we raised. So I'll come back up to the top, and it would probably be sensible to say, yes, I will do some tests of detail on existence. And then you do the same for valuation and rights and obligations as well, accordingly, whatever assertions you've got. Once I made those choices, I'll then come down and look to build in my procedures. And to do that, it tells me I need to use visibility settings to show the required procedures within the section. So to do that, 3 dots up at the top right and tick to show hidden items. I'll click test controls because we can now see it, and click non-audit services to minimize them down. And then to include any of these procedures, having reviewed what it is and the assertions covered off, I'll use the eyeball to show them in the work program. And I'd work down and I'd do the same for my test of detail. Once you've added in all the procedures you'd like to add, you'll come up to the top, check the table, have you got any warnings showing? If you have, that's an indication you need to add in another procedure. There we go, it's a bit slow to show. So it gives you a focus point. But otherwise, I haven't got any showing, so I'll sign off this table as prepared, and I'll let the manager sign it off when they review this. They can knock and sign the table off because they might make changes. And then we've just got the sign off down at the bottom to say, yes, we've tailored our program, obviously turning off hidden items in the process. But that covers off everything that I wanted to go through with you within this session. And I'll pass over to Tom to see if we've had any questions come in.
Thanks, James. We don't actually have any questions at the moment live, which means that everyone is hopefully happy and comfortable with what you've shown so far in the webinar. We're going to go through the wrap-up, I think, because we're almost at time. We are at time. But please don't be shy. You can submit your questions now as we're going through the last couple of slides, and we'll get back to you after the session, and we'll also include those on a Q&A document. I'm just going to share my screen again, just to remind you of how you can do that. And excuse me, and we can see that we've got the Q&A option. We've also got some additional guidance that we can signpost for you. I'm just going to go through a few bits of signposting for some resources. As you may have done for today, you can register for other webinars that are coming up and look at agendas and that kind of thing at on the events page. That's under the resources section of our website. You can either type in that web address there or go to caseware.com/UK, and you'll see resources at the top. In terms of additional guidance, we have a YouTube client services YouTube channel. We have a dedicated cloud audit playlist on there, which will give you bite-sized guidance on some of the things that you've seen today and some of the things that you haven't. So certainly head over to the YouTube channel, subscribe, set your notifications, and then we'll let you know when new videos are added. Those are sort of couple of minute videos here and there. Also, the recording of this webinar will be there. And you can also find our knowledge base. That's at my.caseware.com. If you head over to there, you can view the majority of guidance and things like webinar recordings and quick vids and step-by-step articles without logging in. There is a login level, which would be for things like downloads, but certainly for accessing guidance, you don't need to log in there. So it's nice and easy to access your content. We have a getting started guide for Cloud Audit, which will give you a higher level overview, a bit like you've seen today. It will also include some of the bits that you didn't see today, like the completion part of the audit. And certainly, if you would like us to send that over to you, then let us know in the Q&A. But we will also link to it on the article that will include the recording of the session. And that brings us to the end of today's webinar. We hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. Take care, and we'll see you next time.